Hello, I'm Susan Elliott, the News and Special Reports Editor for Musical America. Today, we're going to be speaking with James Robinson. James has been the Artistic Director of Opera Theater of St. Louis since 2009, where his interest in contemporary work has led to numerous world premieres and quite a few revivals of contemporary work. Most recently, he has finished up doing a revival of Harvey Milk by Stuart Wallace and the world premiere of Awakenings by Tobias Picker. Right now, he is working on M. Butterfly, the world premiere of which is happening presently. And he has in his date book plans to stage Champion at the Metropolitan Opera next spring, a follow-up to his staging of Fire Shut Up in My Bones at the Metropolitan Opera last fall. Hello, James.
Hello, good morning.
For James or Jim?
I go both ways. It's entirely up to you.
You are Artistic Director at Opera Theater St. Louis.
Correct.
And you've been there since 2009. Yeah.
Yep.
How much of your time is spent with that company and how much of your time is spent elsewhere directing as, quote, I guess, freelance, I guess you'd call it?
Well, let's see. I spend a good 10 weeks in St. Louis when we're up and running for the season. So we start rehearsals at about the end of April and we go through June. So I guess that's about 10 weeks. And then there are other times when I am in St. Louis or doing St. Louis specific business. And then the rest of the time I'm guest directing at other opera companies.
So where are you based?
I am based in Rancho Mirage, California, just outside of Palm Springs, but I also maintain a residence in Brooklyn, New York.
Ah, okay.
I like to say I'm tri-coastal, so the West Coast, the East Coast, and the coast of the Mississippi.
Okay. Well, I'm just thinking now, since March, you have directed at the Kennedy Center, Written in Stone.
Yep.
And then you were in Chicago for Fire Shut Up in My Bones. Mm-hmm. And then you were in St. Louis doing Awakenings and Harvey Milk.
Yep.
And now you're in Santa Fe doing M. Butterfly.
Yes.
When do you sleep?
Well, that's a good question. 22 has been a very busy year, and a lot of the reason for that is because we had so many postponements due to the pandemic, and it seemed like a lot of things ended up in 22. So that's why this has been a very, very busy 7 months or so. Fortunately, I do get a break after M. Butterfly opens and after I finish working with the apprentice artists here at the Santa Fe Opera. I'm staying on for an additional 3 weeks after we open M. Butterfly to work with the young artists. And then I get most of my fall is free.
That's what you think.
It's funny that you should say that, because I thought, yeah, except for that meeting here and that workship here and that.
Right. Yeah. So you must have a team that you work with, as aside from designers and choreographers and so forth. Do you have an assistant that you work with consistently on these?
It's interesting. I do have a team of designers that I work with pretty regularly. And it seems like we move from one project to the next, which is, always exciting. And we've worked together for such a long time. It makes it easy and efficient. But I tend to work with different assistant directors because I really believe in nurturing younger talent. So one of my goals is always to bring on assistants who are breaking into the business or who are looking for opportunities. And so over the past several months, I've had different assistants for each project, which is very exciting to me.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
And how are the rehearsals going for M. Butterfly? You're opening what, in 2 weeks or a week?
I think we open in 10 days.
Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting. This project was meant to take place in 2020 at the Santa Fe Opera, and of course it got postponed. So what's interesting about it is I was able to maintain a lot of the you know the prep work that I had done for 2020 in my head. So coming into it 2 years later wasn't that difficult, fortunately, because I remembered all of the reasons why we had made certain design choices and all of that. So it's been going remarkably well. This is the fourth time I've worked with the composer Wang Ro, one of my dear friends and also a magnificent composer. And I think this is the third time or fourth time working with David Henry Wang. We have a terrific cast in Santa Fe for this, and also Carolyn Kwan is conducting. So we've been having a terrific time. It's been going very, very well.
Have you not put together collaborative teams yourself, coming up with an idea and then putting them together? Is that what happened with Champion, or was that? Tell me about that.
No, that's correct. When I became artistic director at Opera Theater of St. Louis, one of my goals was to intensify, I guess I should say, the number of world premieres we would do, or in addition to doing recently composed works. And I thought that one thing that would be really exciting was to reach out to artists who had not worked in the opera business either at all or not frequently. So one of the big projects that I started working on at Opera Theater of St. Louis a number of years ago was to create a jazz opera. And that was with Terrance Blanchard. That ended up being Champion. So I was put in touch with Terrance, had a wonderful meeting with him. I also had very good feelings about his ability to take on an opera project, mostly because of his work in film.
Right.
So he had a lot of experience understanding drama, and he also wrote an album, recorded an album called it's his Hurricane Katrina album, that I thought had, it's called A Tale of God's Will, and there was a lot of drama in it, and it was very lyrical. So and he was a little surprised when I asked him about coming on board to do an opera, but his father was an amateur opera singer and an opera lover, so it seemed like a natural fit. So I put that team together, and we did that. It was very successful. And then on opening night, I approached Terrance and I said, "This was fantastic. Let's do another one." And Fire Shut Up in My Bones was the result. But then there were other projects that we put together. An opera based on a Salman Rushdie novel called Shalimar the Clown. That was Jack Perla and the playwright Rajiv Joseph. Ricky Ian Gordon and Roy Zavavrik wrote something called 27, which was about Gertrude Stein. Awakenings, most recently at Opera Theater of St. Louis with Tobias Tucker. So, I like to do a lot of new pieces, but along the way, I think sometimes it's important to give composers a second chance. Things that have not been performed very often, that deserve to be heard and seen again. Another Tobias Picker opera was Emmeline, hadn't really been done since its premiere. We did the American premiere of Unsuk Chin's Alice in Wonderland. That I'm a great admirer of her music, but the reason why I think it wasn't done in the United States was just the orchestra was too huge. The orchestration is quite dense. So we asked her to reduce it, and then we gave it the American premiere. So there are other projects like that. Ricky Ian Gordon's Grapes of Wrath, which is an epic piece, almost 4 hours long. We asked him to condense it to 2 hours or so. So I like doing that. I think that's equally important to creating new works.
Right. to what degree are you functioning as a dramaturg on these brand new babies?
Well, on all the new pieces, I do function as dramaturg, because I think it's important to get in there early. And I also as director of these things, I think it's important to work very closely with composers early on.
Right.
So, the other thing that I think that helps me work with composers is my background is actually in composition. I studied composition for a long time, and I'm no longer a composer, so nobody has to worry about that. But having that knowledge and that experience, I think enables me to work very efficiently with composers, and also with librettists too. So that's been very, very helpful, and that has served me quite well over the years as I help to create these new pieces.
Right. So so you're sort of in St. Louis as artistic director for a total of like 3 or 4 months out of the year, and the rest of the time you're flying around to exotic places.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. So what about working overseas? I know you've done plenty of that. Is that something in the near future as well?
Yeah, I had done a fair amount of work in Europe. I've done work in Asia and Australia. When I became artistic director at Opera Theater, I really wanted to focus on opera theater and these goals of creating new works, and I decided not to take on too much international work because sometimes it just requires a much longer period of time.
Right.
In Europe, you just tend to have to devote more weeks to what you're doing.
When you're putting together something like Champion, kind of from scratch,
Mm-hmm.
what is the order, or does everything happen at once? I mean, do you talk to the composer, and then you reach out to the librettist, and then you find the money? Or do you go to the different companies and say, are you interested in coming in on this project with us at Opera Theater St. Louis? How does that work?
Well, each project, is different. With Champion, the most important thing was to identify a composer, and fortunately it was Terrance. And then it took a while before Terrance landed on a subject that was interesting to him, something that ignited his passion. So, it was several months before we figured out what the subject would be. And it was Terrance's idea to write an opera about Emile Griffith. And we had really struggled to find a subject. And so, so when Terrance said, I want to write an opera based on Emile Griffith, I said, fantastic, that's great. Who's Emile Griffith? And then he told me, and this was a very operatic, character.
Right.
He had worked with the playwright and film director, Michael Christopher, on a couple of films. And he said, I would love to work with Michael on this. Michael had no experience in opera, but was an opera lover. And I happened to know Michael. So I worked with Michael on just sort of the nuts and bolts of the libretto.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, at Opera Theater of St. Louis, we have a very robust commissioning program. So the funding at Opera Theater of St. Louis was pretty much set. We have this series called New Works, Bold Voices. Right. And so the funding of that was not, so difficult. With Fire Shut Up in My Bones, Terrance's second opera, it was interesting because the Metropolitan Opera was following the progress of that commission. And Peter Gelb, whom I'd gotten to know and worked with on Porgy and Bess, said, keep me abreast of what's going on with Fire Shut Up in My Bones. So after Fire opened in 2019, Peter said, we want to do it at the Met. And I was very surprised, happily surprised. Terrance was, thrilled, but we had then to make revisions for the Met, basically expanding it because it was a rather small ensemble for Fire Shot of My Bones. And then, of course, doing the same thing with Champion.
I was just going to say, how are you dealing with bringing Champion to the Met this spring?
Well, it's pretty much the same process. We know what the scale of the Metropolitan Opera is. We're basing the Metropolitan Opera version of Champion on the Opera Theater St. Louis production.
Right.
And then, we're just kind of supersizing it a bit and allowing Terrance and Michael Christopher to make some revisions to the piece. So it's not just adding bodies. It's really, okay, how can we enhance certain moments and how can we maybe illuminate the story more? So it's really thrilling, I have to say, and I'm excited that the Met has taken on these two projects that we started at Opera Theater St. Louis. It's very exciting.
Here's a question. Here's a nice, big, broad question. What is an opera director's biggest challenge, and especially in the 21st century?
That is a broad question.
Sorry about that.
No. It's actually funny because I was having a conversation yesterday when we were working in the theater here in Santa Fe, which is a wonderful theater, wonderful company to work for. And somebody said, wow, you're always so calm and your team is so organized and you just get the job done. I think the biggest challenge these days is to find a way of keeping a very happy rehearsal room, to make sure that everybody feels like they're working towards the same goal. And then once you get into the theater, it can be a little crazy and stressful, and you just have to rely on, the expertise of your collaborators, your team. And, these days in the opera business, it's a little tricky because I'd say you don't get as much time as you used to. Schedules get tighter and you really have to figure out how to work with less time. Right. So I think I'm a big believer in making sure we always have a happy and collaborative room, and that we work very efficiently to get things done so that when we hit the stage, we're ready for it and it's not chaos.
Well, do you feel that the climate has changed? And I don't mean general climate. We all know about that.
You know about that.
In opera, post-pandemic, what do you see going forward as the biggest obstacles to keeping on?
Well, I mean, I think one of the biggest obstacles right now is there's a bit of insecurity in terms of audiences. Are they comfortable going back into the theater?
Right.
I've seen that everywhere. I don't think it's unique to places that I've worked. I've seen it everywhere, and I've heard from various companies, and we just have to deal with that, and we're still dealing with it. And another thing is our rehearsal practices are very, very different than they used to be. Here in Santa Fe, there's a very robust COVID policy, and we're rehearsing in masks. We have to go through regular testing, but that has been the case wherever I've worked in the past 2 years. That presents a bit of an obstacle. It's harder to rehearse in masks. Singers hate it. That's a challenge. You have to find a way of just getting through that. So I think that's one of the big things. Yeah. But everybody's willing to do what they have to do. in order to keep things going. So that's the biggest thing that I've noticed. On a more positive note, I guess I would say I think there has been so much more interest in creating new works on all scales, you know. And I think, you know, people are and I don't know whether this is a result of the pandemic or just where we are these days, but there's, you know, like vigorous commissioning of new works. And I think that's very exciting. And audiences seem to be turning out for that. And I hope that continues.
So thank you very much. I look forward to seeing M Butterfly when it makes its way to the East, which I'm sure it's either already in the works, or you're going to tell us whether it is or not.
I can't say yet.
I figured.
Coming to a theater near you. How's that?
Oh, that's great. I like that. Okay.